After studying this module, you shall be able to understand the errors of measurement, know why errors are more common in psychological measurements, know the relationship between measurement errors and reliability, know the sources and types of different types of measurement errors, differentiate between chance errors and systematic errors, comprehend the concept of interpretative errors, understand the importance of considering variable error, personal error and constant error in measurement. Humans have natural tendency to make errors. Even in our day-to-day life, we commit a number of errors, some of them because of our nature and others because of sudden situational changes or chance factors. This implies that errors are as necessary as purity because nothing can be labeled as complete or perfect in itself. The same is true for measurement, be it physical, mental or psychological. Like physical sciences, measurement in psychological sciences is not free of errors. Rather, the errors of measurement in behavioral science and psychology are much more prevalent than in physics because the nature of the subject is comparatively more complex. Consider an example in which 4 individuals A, B, C and D were asked to measure the length of a 50-inch long table. The length measured by A, B, C and D was 49.2 inches, 49.6 inches, 49.9 inches and 50 inches respectively. Although the table is a physical object, the 4 persons did make error in measuring its length. Now, consider another example in which a psychologist is measuring IQ level of 4 students of his class by using 3 different standardized intelligence scales. Chances are bleak that he would get similar numerical value of IQ for each student on all 3 scales. Many chance factors, situational factors and personal biases may play their role in assessment, influencing the result. This module throws light on the problems in psychological measurement, emphasizing on the concept of errors of measurement, their sources and types. Different sources of measurement errors covered in the section are chance errors, biased errors, interpretative errors, variable errors, personal error and constant error. Measurement errors can hamper the reliability of the measurement, so it is essential to reduce these errors by taking precautions. What are errors of measurement? Consider the following 2 examples. Example 1. On a certain test, the intellectual capacity of a child was calculated as 115, but his actual intelligence quotient was 120. This error is due to the unreliable test used and is called the error of measurement. Example 2. In a language test of English, a student scored 70 marks out of 100, but in another language test of English, he scored 50 marks out of 100. This is also attributed to error either in test or in measurement. Generally speaking, the difference between the actual score of a person on a certain test, measure, job and the obtained score by him is called error of measurement. Errors of measurement refer to the difference in an individual's hypothetical true score and the actual score obtained by him. Since exact determination of an individual's hypothetical true score is not possible, all the measurements carry an element of error. Why errors are more common in psychological measurements? Both the measurement and errors of measurement are more common in behavioral sciences and psychology in contrast to physical sciences. Various reasons support this assumption. First, indirectness of measurement. In contrast to physical attributes that can be measured directly, psychological attributes are measured indirectly by focusing on a set of overt and covert responses of a person. Physical quantities like length, height, weight, temperature, etc. are visible and concretely available for observation and assessment. The attributes underlying psychological processes are presumed to be manifesting themselves through overt behaviors only, which are considered as objective and quantifiable. This renders the meaning and scope of psychological measurement limited and inexact. 2. Lack of absolute zero. In case of psychological measurement, lack of absolute zero means a situation where the property being measured does not exist. The absolute zero is available in case of physical quantities like length, but it is very difficult to decide in the case of psychological attributes. For example, suppose an investigator wants to measure pro-social behavior or attitude towards fashion. It is very difficult to define and find a situation where there is complete absence of pro-social behavior or the attitude towards fashion. Measuring a sample of behavior, not the complete behavior. In psychological measurements, a complete set of behavioral dimensions is not possible, and we take only a carefully chosen sample of behavioral dimensions to assess the attributes in question. For example, the Wechsler intelligence scale uses carefully chosen 35 words from the English dictionary to judge the vocabulary of the test taker. Although the sample is chosen only after fulfilling the various psychometric criteria like randomness, representativeness, and so on, it is always questionable to reach at a conclusion about an aspect of behavior only by measuring a small, though representative part of it. Lack of sufficient stimulus or response threshold. Another problem encountered in psychological measurement is the creation of sufficient amount of variable strength or threshold. Experimental method, the main method behind the scientificity of psychology, heavily suffers from this problem. Apart from this, it is also very difficult to decide the relevant levels of the response threshold that is adequate for an accurate prediction of the behavioral dimension in question. Uncertainty and desirability involved in human responses. Test subjects often give uncertain and desirable responses which generally negate the entire purpose of the psychological measurement. Uncertainty may arise due to the negligence on part of the researcher or carelessness on part of the subject or due to uncontrolled extraneous variables. Although the researcher may correct such problems arising out of uncertainties involved in case of psychological measurements by adhering strictly to the tenets of scientific research and measurement, treating the problem of desirability is more challenging. On tests of intelligence, though the test items like an arithmetic ability, logical numerical ability, and so on lessen the scope of the desirability of responses on part of the subject may resort to guessing, which may again fail the purpose of psychological research and measurement. Variability of human attributes over time. Psychological attributes like intelligence, personality, interest, attitude are likely to vary over a period of time, and sometimes even hours are sufficient to provide scope for such variations. Being highly dynamic processes, these attributes continuously undergo organization and reorganization that is difficult to track them in exact numbers for a researcher. Apart from this variability of attributes acts as a threat to the validity of psychological research and measurement. Problem of quantification. It is questionable whether numbers are eligible and capable of enough to denote all the psychological attributes. Quantitative measurement has its own limitations because everything that exists may not always exist in some amount, and even if it may, we may find it difficult to assign this amount a number that exactly captures its meaning and essence. For example, various emotions like disgust, jealousy, grief, surprise, and so on are difficult to quantify. A researcher may find it difficult to decide various levels for such variables in quantifiable terms, and the choice of a number that is appropriate for a particular level of such attributes may become even more difficult. Sources or types of errors. Empirical findings have shown that psychological variables, when measured, always show some degree of random errors. Commonly found measurement errors in psychological assessments are: 1. Accidental or chance errors. Psychologists have divided the errors of measurement in two types: accidental or chance errors and systematic or biased errors. Accidental or chance errors, as the nomenclature suggests, can occur at any time and produce errors in results. Examples of such interfering accidental or chance errors are sudden noise during test administration, physical inconvenience or pain experienced by the subject during the administration, failure to understand the instruction to conduct the test, etc. As these factors are situational, the amount of chance errors varies as the situation changes. Also, the direction in which they work varies, that is, such errors can sometimes increase and sometimes decrease the resultant value. When the scores of students increase or decrease, it is the chance factors that are at work. An important quality of chance factors is that with repeated measurements, these errors diminish naturally. When accidental or chance errors are inherent in the test or instrument being used, they are called test-centered errors. It is not possible for any test to be totally culturally free because no test can contain all the items applicable to all types of cultures. Any test administered in two random samples from a population yields different results, and this difference in results is attributed to the test-centered errors. This type of error is test-centered because items related to the different populations cannot be put together in one test. The second type of chance errors are subject-centered errors. All the factors related to the subject like health, motivation, will, attention, factor, working ability, and so on do matter during the administration of the test. Any disturbance in these factors can bring about significant difference in the results. The third type of chance error is assessment error. Generally, sufficient numbers of examiners are not available to assess the subject's result, which causes inconvenience as well as errors of measurement. In material assessment, such errors are less, but in the assessment of detail or essay-type responses, these errors are more prominent because the situation factor has to be considered. Thus, the degree of such errors is more. Systematic or biased errors. Systematic or biased errors in measurement result due to polluted thoughts, personal biases, and improper morals. These errors generally occur in a specific direction and can produce quite misleading results. No measurement can be claimed to be free of systematic errors. The first category of systematic errors is personal errors, which arise from mistakes made by the tester during the test administration or lack of alertness on his part. For example, Errors made in reading the thermometer, stopwatch or the test manual. Such errors may also occur when a tester is in haste and starts or stops the stopwatch early or delayed due to some reason. This shows its effect directly on the experiment or results and destroys the actual aim of the study. These errors can be removed by comparing the results obtained by several testers or experiments. The second type of biased errors arises from carelessness. These errors are more evident when, for example, the experimenter, instead of writing 0.1, writes 1, or instead of writing 0.1, writes 0.01, or instead of the positive sign, he writes a negative sign or vice versa. These errors can actually alter the results. In order to avoid these errors, the experimenter and the evaluator should be very careful while recording and calculating the results. The next type of biased errors is unavoidable errors. Social scientists are generally interested in humans, and human behavior is influenced by so many internal and external factors that it is perhaps impossible to tell the magnitude of these factors in a study or experiment. The most evident factors can be controlled by the scientists, but there are still too many factors left uncontrolled, and these factors leave their impact by altering the behavior in some way or the other. There are many factors which we might think cannot influence the particular behavior, but still they do leave some impact. These unchecked, uncontrolled factors produce errors called unavoidable errors. Such errors can be reduced by applying more control measures in an experiment. In addition to the above stated classification, there is another classification for errors of measurement by Mercel. According to him, there are 4 kinds of errors of measurement in behavioral studies: interpretative errors, variable errors, personal errors, and constant errors. Interpretative errors. There are 2 shortcomings in the measurement of behavioral quality. First, there is no absolute 0 point. Second, it is not certain that whether all the points on the scale are equidistant. Because of these 2 reasons in measurement, there is no value or meaning of data and results until the results are interpreted by other persons. Interpretative errors occur due to the wrong or erroneous interpretation of the test or experiment results or scores. Sometimes these errors occur because of a set of wrong assumptions on the part of the researcher, and sometimes these errors occur due to some inherent problems related to the numerical measurement of the psychological properties. In interpretative errors, the examiner is usually not able to understand as to in which group's context is an individual score to be interpreted. In such a situation, generally, the examiner evaluates inappropriately and also interprets incorrectly. Such mistakes are known as interpretative errors. These are committed due to the misunderstanding by one or the other regarding which kind of group an individual has been compared to and in what way the comparison between the individual and the group has been expressed. For example, in a test, the scores obtained by the students of high school are compared to the scores obtained by the students of intermediate or those of class 8. The difference in the interpretation of results will be significant. Similarly, the difference would be evident in the hypothesis. These types of errors are known to be related to the standardization of the test. By standardization, we mean that a test should be administered to well-defined groups and the scores obtained by these groups should be recorded because these records set the standard for a particular test. For any test, the standards can be prescribed for many, and these standards can be explained in different forms such as occupation, geographical area, sex, age, school, grade, and so on. The main objective of this distribution is to compare an individual score to appropriate group norms. Variable errors. The second type of errors in psychological measurement as per Mercel's classification is variable errors. Variable errors are labeled so because the degree with which they occur in a test or experiment varies from person to person. These errors are consequences of impurities arising due to different reasons and situational factors. For example, if the IQ of a person is measured during 3 different occasions by different persons, the results will vary. Personal errors. The third type of errors in measurement is called personal errors. These errors are due to subjective element of an individual. For example, if 4 persons sitting in a car are asked to read the speedometer, the difference in the readings will be quite evident. Similarly, 2 persons evaluating and interpreting the same response do so quite differently because each has a unique perspective. In the same way, 2 testers evaluating one subject express their results differently, and if the same subject takes the same test twice on different occasions, it gives different results. All these errors have been called as personal error, and they should be thoroughly checked out, kept in mind during the measurement of behavioral qualities. Efforts are made to reduce potential errors during test and measurement through objectivity. Constant errors. These are based on the fact that most of the behavioral qualities are measured indirectly. It is not possible in psychological measurement, like in mental ability, to dissect the person's brain and tell that this much is his mental ability or intelligence. Instead, here the measurement is related to internal abilities and qualities. It is evident that the score of any individual on a mental ability test depends on his ability to read as well as to write. The difference in these two qualities gives rise to constant errors. Such errors are called constant errors because the amount of such errors remains constant irrespective of the tester. Such errors are related to the test validity. All measurements are subject to error. Error in the measurement of physical quantity or psychological attribute is the deviation from the actual value. Errors are more prone in psychological measurements in comparison to physical measurements as human subjects are involved who are dynamic, fluid, and continuously changing with time and situations. Measurement errors decrease the reliability of psychological assessment. Accidental or chance errors are those errors that can occur due to mistake on the part of the experimenter or subject. These are of 3 types: test-centered errors, subject-centered errors, and assessment error. These errors diminish by repeated measurements. Systematic or biased errors are inherent errors of measurement that always give a constant deviation. These include personal errors, errors from carelessness, and unavoidable errors. Interpretative errors occur due to the wrong or erroneous interpretation of the test or experiment results or scores. Variable errors are consequences of situational factors and vary from person to person Personal errors are due to subjective elements of an individual. Constant errors remain constant irrespective of the tester and are related to the test validity.